This podcast may contain explicit language. Don't be anxious. Whatever God ordains is for the best. Peter Panchali is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique rating style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
No real side quips this week, no Patton Oswalt comments, so you get a reprieve.
Yeah, I guess so.
So we are here tonight to discuss Peter Panchali for our 276th episode, celebrating its 70th anniversary this week. Written and directed by Satyajit Ray. Cinematography, you good? You good?
I'm good.
Cinematography by Subrata Mitra. Music by Ravi Shankar. Starring, here we go.
Give me my popcorn.
Kanu Banerjee as Harihar Roy. Karuna Banerjee as Sarbajaya Roy. Subir Banerjee as Apu Burba. No. As Apurba Apu Roy, Runki Banerjee as Durga Roy as a child, Uma Dasgupta as Durga Roy as a teenager, Chanubala Devi as Indir Thakran. Okay, how bad is this?
If you hear the sound of popcorn popping in the background, excuse me.
Tulsi Chakraborty as Prasanna, and Haran Banerjee as Chinibas. All right. Grade, a B for
minus.
effort?
B minus.
B minus, I'll take it.
Wait,
Yeah.
Are you not going to do the author?
No, I was not even going to... I saw like 17 consonants and I'm like, no, I'm not touching that shit. Okay, so obviously we've gone way far off track tonight already. I will introduce our guest, who most of you already know, our returning celebrity guest, the co-host of the War Starts at Midnight podcast, making his 10th appearance on the show to date. Please welcome back Peterson W. Hill.
Very excited to be back for this one. If only to hear you pronounce all of those names. Pronounce is probably a generous term.
I got a B minus. What?
Hey, look, that's D's are for diplomas, right?
Sure. Except in law school, apparently you need to establish like a C plus average, and even then you might even be on probation.
And a C plus? Huh?
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, it's rough out there. Anyway.
I interviewed a girl today who is about to go to law school, and she's going for human rights law. And
sure,
she's just pretty smart young lady. I was like, you're going to be all right one day.
She's just about to make a very stupid decision.
Her mom has 4 degrees, she said. So I think it's I think it's a family thing.
I'm sorry. I definitely object. My sisters can say that all the other degrees are equally as hard, or they have all sorts of things. They are time intensive, sure. But I'm sorry. Until you go through law school, you don't know the just general pain and unease and angst of literally every moment of just about every day.
Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, that, and I would assume medical school. Just the wealth of things you need to know in medical school, and thinking of pronunciation. I mean, these are...
But medical school, the biggest difficulty with that is when you get to like residency and you have to like stay up for 24 hours at a time. They have some crazy schedules when it comes to that shit. However,
which is starting to crack down on.
Well, thankfully, because it's just not healthy. How are they not killing people left and right?
They could be.
Yeah. All right. So we are here to discuss Peter Panchali, which Dad had not heard of before I announced it last week.
I don't look too far ahead in the schedule.
Yeah, that's quite apparent. Regardless, Dad, since neither of us had seen this movie, what were your first impressions?
I thought the cinematography was really quite stunning for a low-budget film. I thought the overall story was interesting and simple, very solid. I thought it was a little boring at times, kind of drug, and I was kind of trying to figure out the point of some of the scenes and such. But I guess it was supposed to be more of a snapshot of life in early 20th century India, especially among the poor.
I guess the first thing that stuck out to me, and I thought it was maybe some of the cinematography, but this movie looks fucking gorgeous in the restoration. We watched it off of, I guess it's now HBO Max again. And the Criterion version of this that they recently did, I want to say it's within the last 10 years. It's outstanding. But I think there is still something to be said, definitely, for the cinematography and how they provide you such kind of intimate, close looks at small, almost documentary-like takes in the way he's framing certain shots, particularly of people in their individual moments. Story-wise, I'll admit that I was kind of bored by it up until the point where the beaded necklace episode happened. And even then, it took until that moment where she throws Durga out for me to really sit up and start to really hone in on the rest of this story. And I know that we're supposed to focus on Apu. I think that's not having known anything really about this story going in. He's on the cover. I know that he's somehow part of this whole trilogy because I knew just tangentially from talking to other people, and it's part of my film discussion group. They're reading each of the books, and then they're doing the 3 movies in a series that they were doing. I can't attend because it's on Wednesdays when we normally record.
Who are those books written by?
Okay, fine. You want to go there? You want your good laugh here? All right. This is going to be the worst butchering in history. Bibhuti Bhushan Bandiopadhyaya.
You should be glad that Trump's in office, because otherwise that might be a war crime.
Well, you put me on the spot. I knew it was way too many syllables. What do you want? There's a reason why they all identify themselves at the call center as Scott. They know we're not going to be able to pronounce Bibiorashahar or something. Anyway. All right. Now that everybody's had their sufficient laughs at the white guy trying to pronounce Indian names, I found the story to be particularly engaging in the second half. I think the class struggle, and particularly the story of the mother, sucked me into this one to the point where at the end, I thought it was actually a fairly beautiful slice of life movie. And while it's not one that I would necessarily turn back on probably very often, it's one that I definitely appreciated watching. A lot more than I think some of the other ones that we've tested the water on occasionally.
Yeah, I think you guys kind of hit at something, both first-time watches for you, that the first half, you're trying to kind of get your bearings of what exactly this movie's up to. And then I think it is kind of at the beaded necklace moment that it really clicks into place what this movie's trying to do. And then now I think this is my 4th time seeing it, going back to it, is there's such a cumulative power to watching this family and really watching this family struggle and knowing kind of where the story is going to go from the beginning. I think lets you cue into certain things about the dynamics. And I think, there is a quiet strain of feminism in this. And I think, especially for 1955 India, I think it's quite interesting in that regard. And I think Satyajit Ray is really well above or before his time in a lot of this. And then you cued in another thing, the natural beauty of this movie and the shots. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. The cinematographer was a photographer. This is truly the first shot he ever did for a movie was for this movie. And Satyajit Ray, the same thing. He just struggled to make this movie, and I think you can see that. And I think that's just, I truly feel by the end of this movie, there's a cumulative kind of pain, and not in a kind of rubbing your nose in it. It's just this really cathartic, gorgeous movie that ends with, I think, a really powerful moment. And then as you continue the trilogy, Parajito is the second one. I think it all comes back together even more miraculously. And it ends with The World of Apu, which is a beautiful, beautiful movie as well. I mean, it's seeing the first one is good, and then seeing them all together, I think, shows you the general humanity of these movies even more.
So, Peterson, what is your relationship to the film?
Having gone to film school, one of the things you hear about are these directors. You know, it's Fellini and Kurosawa, and you do hear about Ray. Satyajit Ray is one of the kind of 3 to 5 big names you hear. For me, though, I went to Fellini and I went to Kurosawa, and for some reason, and partly it's because it was harder to get Ray's films, I hadn't gone to him until around 2010 to 2012, maybe a little bit after that. So seeing it now, you know, my first time was definitely before kids, and I think even seeing it after kids also brings a different perspective as well, which obviously a lot of movies do have that thrust and feel where you can appreciate it before kids, and then once you have kids, you're like, oh, okay, I understand this infinitely more now.
Yeah, I could definitely understand that perspective might change for me in a different circumstance or under a different context, but I still felt it become very powerful the more the struggle, particularly from the mother's perspective, came to the forefront for me.
Yeah. I think the real way to get into this movie, especially on a first watch, and not having seen the second and third movie for you guys, is the story of the mother. I think her performance is extraordinary. I think there's the moment where you're hearing the father and he's talking about, oh, we can't move to the city. And it's his scene. And you see her kind of, I don't even know if she's in frame, and he's just kind of lying, falling asleep. And the camera just kind of pans to her, and you hear her talking about like her hopes and her dreams. And it zooms in on her. It's talking about how she had this whole life she wanted to live that now she's not getting to live because they chose to come to his ancestral home. And I think this movie in many ways is about kind of the quiet and silent ways you kind of let yourself down in life. And after you have kids, you make more sacrifices. You don't think about those sacrifices as a kid, but obviously as a parent, you're doing them, you know, subconsciously a lot of the times. And I think that's what this movie also is getting at, is the sacrifices, especially this mother. You know, the father, I think, is a loving and caring father. He's a bit aloof, and kind of as the trilogy progresses, you do see the father like show up in Apu. You see him, because the story really becomes centralized on Apu more in the second and third one. You do see so many strains of the father in Apu.
So a quick little background on the film. Based on a book of the same name, Peter Panchali was released in Indian cinema on August 26th, 1955. On a budget between an estimated $14,000 to $31,500, Peter Panchali is estimated to have grossed $21 million total during its entire lifetime. So that was up until, I believe, 2017. Peter Panchali is described as a turning point in Indian cinema, as it was among the films that pioneered the parallel cinema movement, which espoused authenticity and social realism. It was the first film from independent India to attract major international critical attention, and it won India's National Film Award for Best Feature Film in 1955. At the time of release, American critics were mixed. However, the film gained international praise and won several awards. In the years since, Peter Panchali has often been cited as one of the greatest films of all time, including in Sight and Sound, where it is placed several times in its critics' polls of the greatest films ever. In 1962, it ranked 11th, in 1992, it was 6th, and in 2002, it was 22nd. It also topped the BFI's user poll of top 10 Indian films of all time in 2002. The magazine ranked the film 42nd in its 2012 critics' polls list of the top 50 greatest films of all time, and 48th in its 2012 directors' poll. In the most recent 2022 edition of BFI's greatest films of all time list, the film ranked 35th in the critics' poll and 22nd in the directors' poll. Peter Panchali was followed by the two films that Peterson has already mentioned that continued the tale of Apu's life, Aparajito, the Unvanquished, I guess is the translation, which was in 1956, and Apur Sansar, the World of Apu in 1959. Peter Panchali currently holds a 98% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes and a 4.3 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Unfortunately, and kind of oddly, does not have a Metacritic rating. Or at least not one that I could find.
Okay.
So, what is this movie about?
I think it's really about the day in and day out struggles and life of a poor family in India and what they derive pleasure from as far as their lives and their relationships internally with each other and their neighbors.
It's definitely a slice of life film as far as I can tell, but it really has a lot to do with economics, class. I kind of find this film to be very anti-caste system and
I think very much so, yeah.
And very socialist in kind of origin. I also think it's about unrealized dreams because the father kind of pursues his own, and there's a very polar opposite feel between the two parents where the father is constantly trying to roam and live out his own dream, meanwhile, even well-intentioned, trying to provide for the family, whereas the mother feels that she can be the only one that is the realist in the relationship and constantly is in this churn of, I have to take care of my family, even at the sacrifice of maybe picking some family over another, which I'm sure we'll get to. So in that sense, I find this to be really deep in a lot of different themes that are going on, even for as simple a story as it is.
Yeah, and I think part of the miracle of this movie is that we're 70 years removed from it, and really 100 years from when it takes place. It takes place in the 1920s. I think 1925 to 1920 or 29 or something like that are the years. But as you watch it, we're 100 years removed, and you touched on this a little bit, but it's, I think, in a lot of ways about how men can go off and lead their lives, and the moms are stuck at home with the mental load, dealing with the children and all these things. And that's not that dissimilar from today. You know, that's still how our society functions in a large way, you know, and I think Rai is so ahead of his time in that kind of regard. But also, as you said, the socialism aspect, I think he really cues in on the mango orchards, and everything keeps falling, and the kids just like go grab it, right? They're not selling these mangoes; it's just in their fields. And she's like, "What? You kids can't take these. You can't take these." And then it comes in at the end. If there is a villain, the villain of the movie is like, "I'm sorry, I don't know why I was so mean. This place makes you bitter and cold, angry." And that's, I think, part of it as well. It's these people get to the end of their lives and we're middle-aged for these people, and they're realizing, what is all this anger and hatred for? It's about the mother trying to cradle and save her child during a monsoon, and everything's stacked against this family, truly. So by the end of it, when all of the tragedy has befallen them, we're watching them go away, and it's the three of them looking sadly at their home, but knowing the only way forward is probably to leave this place, because otherwise we're going to be stuck in the misery. We've been here 15 years. We can't do anything. We can't get forward. This is our chance. Let's get out of here. And hopefully the pain leaves as well.
So, Dad, this is our 7th non-predominantly English-speaking country language film. Basically, outside of the UK, the United States, maybe some Canadian film might have snuck in there occasionally, but essentially for what we're counting, we've done or covered Three Idiots, Your Name, Parasite, La Dolce Vita, Rashomon, Seven Samurai, and now this. Knowing that quite a few of those are ranked very highly on various lists, does this deserve some of the critical praise that it's gotten over its lifetime?
I've been thinking about this for a good day, and I can understand why the love of the film is where it is by a lot of critics, but I also find that there's justification for some of the negative critics or the negative comments by critics, especially close to its release date. So I'm having a hard time saying that it's one of the greatest films, but it is definitely a above average film, and considering the difficulty of its making and where it came from, I think that it does deserve a lot of recognition for that, and probably leapfrogs a lot better financed and better produced films.
I think we've both identified that there are struggles. Well, all three of us in various times watching this have identified that we have struggles at times connecting with the movie, particularly in the early portion of the film as we're still trying to develop character. And I know this film very famously was really not having much of a script. It was kind of loosely based. It was very kind of haphazardly shot. Ray, as Peterson has said, was a first-time director, and so I think that it has some rawness to it, and obviously not having the benefit or the context of comparing it to either of its sequels in the trilogy. I would anticipate that the filmmaking aspect of it got better, but for a directorial debut with somebody who quite literally was filming probably in the middle of the jungle and had no formal education in any of this, nor did probably any of the actors or crew, I think this is fantastic for exactly what it is. And it well outpunts its coverage over what it should have been. And by that standpoint, I think I give it a lot more credit than something that gets similar levels of credit, like a Citizen Kane.
Well,
and yes, I throw that exactly in there for you.
Because Citizen Kane to me is one of the great films. I think undoubtedly, like, you ask 95% of people who love films.
Okay, there you go. There's the caveat, because if you ask a general audience, nobody's going to give a shit about Citizen Kane.
I mean, it's no Dumber Dumber.
But, I think this is a challenging movie in a lot of ways. And I think part of the reason it's challenging is the emotional journey it takes you on. And you do have to, this is not a movie where you can just pick your phone up in 5 seconds, because you're going to miss something. This is truly one you need to kind of immerse yourself in. Make sure, the lights are off. You kids are asleep, and you can really give yourself over to it. Because I think it's, when you do that, it really speaks to you in a way, I think. And this is one that I think, I'm going to return to this quite a bit. And the reason is because of the humanity of it. And I think, I looked and I Googled it, and I don't think he's ever said anything about it, but this feels so much like Richard Linklater and his movies, especially knowing Ray filmed this over 4 years. And Apu doesn't change. The sister changes. Durga changes. But Apu does it. And he ages, and we see him aging, and we see his hair changing. And I think just seeing that, 60 years before Boyhood, basically, I think is really powerful. Just knowing the process of age and growing with this child. And then obviously it's a different actor in the other movies, but I think that's a big thrust of this movie is seeing the age. And so much of this movie is seen through the eyes of Apu, and watching him, like when they go see the train, I think just you're watching this young boy knowing he's not going to be stuck in this village. He can't be. He has ambitions and wants to see the world and be a part of the world in a way that his mother certainly, I think, does, and his father wants to. But his father feels a connection to, I need to live my family heritage and ancestral right in this village. And he's just not built for this world. He's built for modernity, just like Apu's built for modernity. I think that's a big thrust of why this movie works and why people keep coming back to it. Why I think it is one of the great films.
I can actually see, now that you make that comp, a lot of the Patricia Arquette character from Boyhood in the mother in this film.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of overlap. And I was wondering how many other comps, because there were some other ones that I felt were similar or challenging. The perspective changes a bit, but another one I thought of that has kind of a similar style is like a Lady Bird. Obviously, the focus is different because it never really changes from Lady Bird being the primary character, but it still has a lot of those like class themes that are going on, a family that's struggling, but in this particular case, it's a kid who's kind of growing up. And so I think we've seen a lot of these movies. I don't know what the history is in the development of these before or since this movie, but I think these are a little bit more modern. So he may be 20, 30 years ahead of when these movies got much more broad and popular, especially in the United States. I would guess these became a little bit more popular by about the 70s. That feels right. Maybe The Graduate.
Yeah, but I think The Graduate's such a different tone, and it is heightened. Whereas I think Lady Bird is realistic. It is verisimilitude like this. I think the verisimilitude is something like Lady Bird in this, or certainly in dialogue with each other. You know, I love Lady Bird's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I'd put this on there as well. I think partly what makes the comp to Lady Bird really interesting is that you were seeing more, obviously, through Lady Bird's eyes, but you're seeing how disappointed the mom is with their life, and certainly the dad. But it's all through Lady Bird's eyes, and that's why when she has that phone call to her mother in the end, and she says, do you ever like drive around Sacramento and just think how beautiful it is? Like, do you ever do that? Like that feels very much in concert with this movie. And I think, we're going to have these kinds of movies forever because the intimacy of this movie is why it's so powerful. I think the specificity of character and of detail and of watching these lives, these kind of rich human lives, is why this movie still resonates 70 years later and 100 years after it takes place.
That's one of the ironic things I find. I think a lot of people would assume that generalities are what breed universality, but I actually find that specificity is what truly breeds a lot of universality. In this movie in particular, the more granular they go to their life circumstance, and we're certainly not enjoying a similar cuisine or lifestyle to what they're going through, but you can definitely feel with the mother's pain. Regardless that your circumstances or your context is not the same, you can still say that I feel similar emotions to her, even though my circumstances are drastically different than this woman living in the late 1910s in the jungle of India.
And I also think watching the children and just watching them go run and chase the train, trying to find the train, and like it has these myths that you build up in your mind as a child. And I think that's like what part of the power of this movie is as well, is like you're watching these children truly be children. Like when he uses Durga's foil, and they have this little fight between each other. And I'm like, oh, I've seen my children do that. It's so silly and so stupid, but she's the one that gets blamed. And it's another moment where it comes in, like the mom is harboring resentments within herself, and it's not her fault, right? And that's something you do a million times as a parent. And when you're older, you might realize, like, oh, I see that coming out in my parents, or when I was a kid, I see that coming out. But it's also just the kind of humanity of being a kid, being wild and free. And like, I love that moment where she goes and plays with the other kids and Apu doesn't go in, and they kind of like make fun of him a little bit, but he chooses not to. He didn't want to go in. Because I think he feels weird that it's the rich family. So I think that's a big portion of it. And of course, we haven't even talked about the grandmother, like maybe the oldest looking person in the history of film. And I love that these kids, like they're a little bit like, she's so strange, but it's that warmth you have of like your grandparent, and she's not actually related to them. She's just kind of a wandering lady. So they just kind of take care of her. And I think the humanity there is beautiful. She steals her mangoes, and like she comes and she sees when Apu's born. I think that, like, especially when you go back and realize the structure of the movie, seeing it a second time, it's teeming with life in that moment where you're like, oh my God, here's the birth of this child. And like everyone wants to come see him. And that's the life we're going to follow.
So Dad, do you have a plot summary ready for us?
I do. Panchali, meaning Song of the Little Road, is a 1955 film by Satyajit Ray. It tells the story of Abu. I have it phonetically.
I know, and you didn't really read it phonetically. Satyajit
Ray.
No, it's not San, it's Sa.
Satyajit.
Okay. Satyajit
Ray.
Satyajit Ray. It tells the story of Apu, a young boy in a poor village in Bengal. His father, Harihar, I'm butchering it, is a priest who dreams of a better life, while his mother, Sarbajaya, struggles to care for the family. Apu is very close to his older sister, Durga, who finds happiness in small things, even though they are very poor. The film shows daily village life, both its beauty and hardship, through the children's eyes. As the family faces loss and change, Apu begins a journey that reflects the joys and sorrows of growing up.
Thank you. Did you know? This film was shot piecemeal over 5 years. Often, production was halted due to lack of funds. Halfway through filming, Rai ran out of funds. The government of West Bengal loaned him the rest, allowing him to complete the film. This loan is listed in public records at the time as Roads Improvement, a nod to the film's translated title. Did you know? Legend has it that on the first day of shooting, Satyajit Ray had never directed a scene, his cameraman Subrata Mitra had never photographed one, and none of the child actors had even been screen tested for their roles. Did you know? Because of all the many delays in the film's nearly 3-year production, director Satyajit Ray became increasingly apprehensive that some event might occur to prevent his finishing the film. In fact, he attributed his success in that regard to 3 miraculous occurrences, or rather non-occurrences, referring to his cast by their characters' names. 1, Apu's voice did not break. 2, Durga did not grow up. 3, Indir Thakrun, is that better?
That one, yeah, that's more natural.
Did not die. Did you know? After the film's great success, Ray was able to obtain a grant from the West Bengal government, and he was able to complete his projected trilogy at the behest of the then Prime Minister of India. And finally, did you know Satyajit Ray, although he allegedly received a verbal promise of payment for his work as director from the government of West Bengal after it took over production of this film, in fact, he never received any compensation of any kind, despite having worked on it often at his own expense for almost 3 years. Ray was philosophical about this, as he much preferred the international fame the film brought him to any monetary reward. I don't know. I mean, yes, fame buys some stuff, but you got to get some residuals.
I think he bought him the ability to make more movies.
Probably.
And he made movies for another 40 years, really, 37. But yeah, he
Who's
worked
counting?
until he died almost. And he made some of the most seminal Indian films of all time. The Music Room is probably the next big one after this.
So that looks like a good spot for our first break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 277th episode, we welcome back Frank Mendoza to revisit Sunset Boulevard from 1950, celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. Written and directed by Billy Wilder with Charles Brackett and D.M. Marshman Jr. Cinematography by John F. Seitz. Music by Franz Waxman, starring William Holden, Gloria Swanson, and Eric von Stroheim. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Before we get any further, Peterson, what are you working on and where can people find you?
Yeah, so I just recorded yesterday an episode of the Lone Screenplay Podcast. It's going to come out a few days before this on the film Ron from Akira Kurosawa. It's jump back and check out our social network, and then a couple of weeks from now, we're going to do 7 next, maybe. And then always check out my back catalog, War Charts at Midnight. The movie I'd say really connects most to this is the Darjeeling Limited, which is Wes Anderson's travelogue through India, which actually features a significant amount of music from Ravi Shankar, who does the score for this film.
Excellent. Okay, so we left off at Best Performance. Dad, who did you have down?
I have Karuna Banerjee. I thought that she had by far the heavy lifting to carry through a large portion of the film. In the beginning, she had to be kind of, I don't know how you'd put it, a harsh individual towards the children and towards Auntie and such. Then you could see kind of her struggles where, it's clear that her life is not turning out the way she wanted it to, and things are not going the way she wants in general. And ultimately, she becomes a rather sympathetic victim of circumstances. And so I thought she did a really good job overall, having to convey a large amount of emotion over the course of the film.
I'm glad you recognized her here, because as much as I thought she was probably the central figure of the part that I liked the most about the film, which is kind of the second and third part, or at least the back half of the movie, there are just some other characters or people that I thought, even among a very limited cast, maybe carried a little bit more for me on what I was really experiencing in the film. But I think she's an incredibly important character and actress to what the movie ends up becoming. And so I'm glad that somebody else could recognize her, even if I couldn't.
Yeah, and I think for me, I'm going to go with Satyajit Ray and do a dual best performance here. I think Subara Mitra needs to be recognized as well, because these two gentlemen showed up to set first day on a film set for both of them, know nothing about what they're doing. And I think in tandem create this really beautiful thing. And I think it shows in many ways that film is it's a collaborative medium. And if one piece isn't working, nothing's going to work. So I think the way this is filmed and Rye's compositions with Mitra are stunning and tells this tale beautifully.
I agree. I have Rai as my best performer, and then I have Mitra as my secondary performer here, because I do think that they equally work in some form of concert with this. I think I give Rai a little bit of an edge, even though it's a very loose, fly by the seat of your pants script, just maybe a little bit of an edge to separate the two slightly, because it's his vision ultimately. But the film is not as personal. It's not as intimate without the framing that I'm sure Mitra is really giving you through this performance with the cinematography. And so I think they both need to be recognized, at least for my taste here, for what they accomplished on screen and how much I think they've made the film for me.
Yeah. Very well said.
For me, best secondary, I have Uma Dasgupta. I think the teenage Durga was by far, she had to convey both the playfulness and the naivete of a young woman, also reaching out and having to protect and mother her brother, at the same time being kind of playful with him and treating him like a little brother. There's kind of an antagonistic quality at the same time. There's nurturing. And she did a pretty good job for a young woman.
I think there's nothing more that signifies what you're talking about right there for me than the scene at the end when she's right before she gets sick under the tree and she wraps her little brother in her, I guess it's a shawl, is that correct? But tries to take care of him, and he ends up being the one that doesn't get sick, but rather she is. And so I think there's kind of a flip in that moment of she's taking care of him and ends up sacrificing herself in the process.
And I think in tandem with that moment is when Apu decides to throw the beaded necklace into the water and essentially erase her transgression. So he's the only one that knows about it. So he protects her in death in the way that she protected him in life. So there's a really beautiful symmetry in that way. And I also want to say, I think this performance by the teenage Durga also really gets at the knowing what's coming and knowing that she will be cast off into marriage very soon, and she will have no say of who she marries, most likely. That is coming very soon, and you can see the tears in her eyes when she wells up watching her friend get married, and she's like, this is my fate. This is what's going to happen to me. And it's almost like a silent death happens then as well.
That's interesting, because I guess I maybe missed that reading of the situation in that moment. I thought it was more of either A, that she was sad because of a certain level of jealousy, or B, that she was sad that her friend was basically leaving her.
It could be both. It could be all three at the same time. I think that's part of the way Rai lets this movie play out. I think there's a lot of readings you can have of a lot of different moments. And I don't think he gives you the easiest answer in any of these moments, but I can't imagine he was one that was all thumbs up on arranged marriages. So I think
this film is very progressive.
Yeah, so I think that certainly is there. But also if you're a young woman and in 26, 27, you're going to be married off, I think you have to approach it with some kind of grace and know, well, this might be the best it's going to be. This guy might be the best it's going to be. Maybe he has hair, maybe he's bald, maybe he's thin, maybe he's fat, who knows, but maybe we can build a life together. And as Apu gets married later in the trilogy, I think we see that play out for him as well. And then for me, so my secondary is Karuna Banerjee. I think she is wonderful as the mother. We see so much through her, and we also see so much observation of her from the children's perspective. So much of Apu watching her and kind of reacting to the things that life has given her. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but I love that moment where her husband's kind of falling asleep and he's just not really paying attention to her, and she's just starting to talk about how her life, she wanted it to be so different. She thought about all the things that she could have done, but now she's stuck in her husband's home, and the silent disappointment you have with yourself and the life you lead is something she, I think, communicates beautifully.
For most charismatic, I have Chanubala Davi, who plays Auntie. Simultaneously, as you mentioned, probably the oldest looking person ever recorded on film, but I think really the comedic tone of the film is all due to her. Like, she is by far the funniest character in this movie, and there's a lightheartedness, there's a playfulness that happens with her character that I think is really charismatic. It sucks me into the film, at least when she's on screen. But I think her presence being gone is really felt in a different way. The first half of the film feels very childlike and wondrous and full of possibilities. And by the time that she passes away, almost right in the middle of the film, I think it marks a harsh reality and a realism that comes through in the second half of the film. I think the first half of the film, the mother is very much the antagonist because of this relationship she has with Auntie, because of the situation that she has with Durga, eventually throwing her out of the house for at least a temporary period of time, and all of these challenges that she has, even though you can kind of see already a little bit of what Rai is expressing through her character on screen, where she defends the daughter initially, but then she also has that turnaround. We're going to throw her out because we think she's a bad example, or she's definitely a thief. And kind of the complicated nature of that relationship, eventually extending to the relationship between her and Auntie, and her throwing Auntie completely out of the house at that point. And the kind of stern standoff that she has by not even, she will acknowledge her vocally, but she will not look at her when she comes back. I think those are very reminiscent of this character, who is very complex in the first part of the movie, has to put you at arm's length so that by the time we empathize with her in the second half of the film, we've seen the depths of her desperation and her struggle, and that it's actually out of a place of love. So our catharsis as an audience is that much greater.
Yeah, one thing you did mention with the throwing her out of the house scene, because it's only, I think, for a couple of hours. It's not really that long in the grand scheme of things, is I think she's so upset that maybe she didn't steal the necklace. She actually does end up stealing the necklace, but she brought the wealthy family and gave them another reason to kind of look down on them and be petty and be kind of ugly to them. So I think that's a big component of it too, is why she lashes out at her, because she's like, I can't keep dealing with these people. They're the worst. Like, I need to punish you because I need to get my own frustrations and anger.
And I know I've seen some parents do that, where they may not actually be mad at the child per se, but they have a certain level of frustration with their actions and the consequences and results, and so they have to pass down some of that.
And I'll say, so I'll go for my most charismatic. I've got Ravi Shankar. I've got the score of this film is just, I think, incredible. If those who don't know, Ravi Shankar went on to work with George Harrison. I'd say he's probably the most famous person in this movie, or like that has anything to do with this. Other, it's him and Rai, really. But if you're talking to the average person, probably more people know about Ravi Shankar. They certainly know his daughter, at least in America, who's Norah Jones.
Really?
Yeah, I think he like had a one-night stand, and that's the
okay.
maybe they dated for a little while, but he was not like an active part of her life by any means.
Mm.
But I love the score of this film. I think puts you in the time and place of this movie beautifully. And it's just, I think, a really elegant score that fits the movie perfectly.
I would agree. I think that the music, even though it can be a bit repetitive and you kind of lose it at times in the background because it's such a backboard to almost every scene, because it's there at all times. The score never stops. It's never got these quiet like moments to itself. There's always something musical playing behind everything and every action that's going on. It does a good job of building some tension and some emotion and some different things that I do enjoy in a score. And I'm not sure what the film would be without it either. It's such a part of the fabric of how you understand the movie that to be without it, I think it changes the entire makeup of the movie.
Yeah. I agree.
I had for most charismatic, I had Chunabala Davi as well. And one of the things that I thought about is that her death is the vehicle by which the children have lost a level of innocence in the film.
And it's not played, I would say, for true dramatic effect. They just kind of happen upon her. It's not, which I think so much of this movie plays out like this, And if you're a kid, your first experience with death is likely going to be that. It's going to be not particularly dramatic, and it's just going to be kind of matter of fact, which is what this is. And the thing that really stuck with me about the death scene was when she does finally kind of topple over, and Rai really highlights the thud of her head on the ground. It's like a shocking moment of sound that I think is just really evocative and kind of terrifying. That's the moment they sprint and get away. And yeah, the death scene is, I think, truly wonderful. That's a weird thing to say, but yeah.
Well, that's what you're on the show for. Let's move to best scene then. I have 5 nominees here. I have the opening scene with the fruit thief and kind of this initial exchange between Durga and the wealthier family who's, it sounds like, has kind of stolen the orchard from this other family. Then we have the beaded necklace, which we've talked about just before, and kind of an extended sequence from when she's basically the wealthy mother comes in and accuses her of it, all the way to the point where she's thrown out of the house temporarily. Then I have Auntie Returns, and this is kind of that interesting standoff in the middle of the film where she's gone away for a couple of days and stayed with somebody else, and then she comes back, and the mother just will not look at her. And I'm not sure if it's from a place of anger, frustration, or shame that she just won't look at her, but she acknowledges her, but she's still trying to hold up this terse outer shell. That entire sequence really struck me. Then I have the Night of the Storm, which is the night before Durga dies, and then finally Harihar returns, which is the emotional kind of climax that he's seen what his impact of not being there, not providing, and leaving these people to their own devices has wrought. So any other scenes to add?
Not from me.
No, I don't think so. No, not for me.
Okay, so best scene, what do we think is the best scene here?
For me, it's the Night of the Storm. I think that is the moment where everybody, all the characters are at their most vulnerable. The culmination of all of the distraughtness of their lives, their poverty, everything that's been leading to this point, it comes to that culmination. And it is becoming the defining moment of the film, which is the death scene there of Durga. And so I think that's by far the best scene because I think it showcases human tragedy.
It's tough to not go with the storm. I think it's, one, beautifully filmed. Just Rai and Mitra filming this tiny hut and seeing how vulnerable they are And it's just really powerful. But I think, personally, I'm going to go with the beaded necklace scene. That is the scene that I think, as you said, Tom, if you're watching for the first time, that's the scene that really kind of makes you sit up and maybe get on the movie's wavelength. And I think without it, the movie's not quite the same. The relationship with Durga is completely different for the rest of the movie. It doesn't have as much to say about class. And I think it's very important what we're witnessing in this movie. So I think that is the scene, in some ways, is the kind of Pandora's box to understanding it.
That's interesting, because I'm also going to go with a different one, and I will highlight again for many of the same things I've already pointed out when I was nominating it, but Auntie Returns, to me, that standoff and that really callous kind of interaction with one person who is clearly a little too proud to say I'm sorry, and the other person who may feel some level of shame, but feels she has to, out of necessity, keep this old woman at arm's length for the sake of her children. And she basically has to choose between lives. Or at least maybe that's the choice she felt she had to make. So I felt a lot more of the dynamics change in that scene than maybe anything else, even though, as I said before, the beaded necklace scene is kind of the turning point where I think the movie picks up. And the Night of the Storm is kind of the capper. I think this, to me, is kind of the turning point fully between the first and the second half of the movie.
Yeah, you might be right. And actually, I did want to add one scene quickly. It's the train scene. I think that is kind of that really, to me, is the last moment of innocence for these children. Then it all changes. And I think it's really poignant because his sister's like, I know where it is. She didn't know where it is. She's just like, we just kind of go this way, and then you listen for the train, and then when you hear it, you go. So I think that's a beautiful moment that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention.
Favorite scenes for everyone?
Beaded necklace for me. I just think that is really a poignant scene that permeates through the film, and it does show the distance between that family and the neighbors, that they're treated as being poor and are accused of being thievery, etc. It shows that they're not even necessarily a welcome participant in the community.
I'm going to go with the fruit thief scene, even though I picked on the first part of this movie for being kind of slow and plotting, and it's got a lot of character development. It feels very much like the beginning of a novel. And I think it's because it's adapted from a book specifically, that it takes its time to set up its characters, but uses it in this scene that's just kind of very slowly unraveling. And yet, in that moment, we get this like initial central tension, and we meet most of our characters, and I have a further appreciation for it from where we end up at by the end of the film from where we started. And so there's a certain sense of relief or of joy at seeing this family whole again, or back at their most innocent part of the film. That would be why it would be my favorite, even though it may not be the one I emotionally connect with the most.
Yeah, it's tough for me. Favorite with this movie, part of me just wants to go with the ending, just because I think it captures the kind of beginning of hope in some way, as this family leaving the past behind, and the mother kind of slinks into the father's arms, and both Apu and his father are looking out at their home that they're leaving, the only home that Apu's ever known. And I think that moment just ends, and I think it's an unbelievably powerful capper to this movie that is filled with just exquisite moment after exquisite moment.
I think that's why I end up going with it for my most indelible moment, because, and it's most specifically honed within that scene into the one moment where he says, and I have this shawl for Durga.
Yeah.
And you just see everything break apart and him slowly come to realize exactly what has happened and the pain that's all there. I think that's the crystallizing moment of the film for me.
Yeah, and I think that moment too, when the father just realizes, I think he's going to blame himself forever. And in some way he might be, I wouldn't say culpable, but there may be some responsibility that he wasn't providing. But he did not do it maliciously. It was not something that it's just a personality thing for him. And I think that moment really hits like a ton of bricks. But for me, I think the indelible moment is the storm into Durga's death. It's just the storm plays out so matter-of-factly. It's not heightened. It just plays kind of how a storm probably would play. And Durga just like needing her mother, even as a teenager, just needing to hold her mother, needing to feel that protection. And unfortunately, she can't protect her. There's only so much she can do. And when Apu realizes that his sister died, it's just like everything else in this movie. It's so matter of fact, and it hits like a ton of bricks. And I think it's unbelievably powerful moment.
My most indelible moment is Harihar returns, because I think it is realization on his part, as Peterson said, that he has failed and that he failed to protect his daughter and that he is blaming himself. And I think at this point in time, he has to take responsibility. I mean, the simple fact throughout it, oh yeah, I haven't been able to collect my pay. The landlord is a good guy. I don't want to make waves. He's passive. And him deciding to move from the ancestral home is the first overly aggressive or decisive action that he's taken throughout the entire film. And that alters kind of him in the path or trajectory he goes at this point in his life.
So that looks like a good spot for our second break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmode Podcast and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 249 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Joe Karoff, 103, American graphic designer, designed the iconic 007 James Bond logo. Terrence Stamp, 87, English actor. Superman 2, The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Billy Budd. Tristan Rogers, 79. General Hospital, The Young and the Restless, and The Rescuers Down Under. Michael Sloan, 78. American television writer and producer, co-creator of The Equalizer. Other credits included BJ and the Bear, Quincy, M.E. Daniel Spencer, 60. American actress. What's Happening? Michael Click, 77, American television producer, 24, Homeland, Love and Death, Emmy winner in 2006 and 2012.
So as far as my relationships with all of these, I think it's no secret that Dad and I are both big James Bond fans here on this show. We are probably not going to get to it yet this summer, since the summer is like a week away from being over and school has already started, and we have yet to finish our complete watch through of the James Bond list. But I promise you we're working on it, and it is coming, that we will have a live episode on the YouTube channel eventually. But yes, James Bond is a big part of our film love, and I think it's something we both connect over. I know that at any point, if I turn on, especially one of the old Connery Bond movies, I can get my dad to sit up and watch on a weekend. Terrence
Dana,
Stamp.
did you show Tom these young? Did like he get into him young, and it was a bonding thing when you were a kid? When he was a kid?
I think I've talked about this. My dad did not give me my love of James Bond. It actually came from my grandfather, and not the one that the studio is named after, but also my other grandfather, who is named Ron, he owned some of the original Ian Fleming novels and gave those to me. But this was after I spent a week, 2 weeks at their house in the summer, some year when I was like, I don't know, probably in middle school. And they took me over to the library and we rented either VHS or DVD copies of some of the old Connery Bonds. So the first Bond movie I ever watched was Diamonds Are Forever. And so that's always had like a very sentimental place in my heart. But I also watched Dr. No and Goldfinger during that week, and I watched them all multiple times. And since then, I've been kind of a big aficionado. I think Dad and I developed a relationship link over these movies, as they'd have like a marathon on the old Spike TV. And I don't know, I'd put these on the afternoon, and all of a sudden Dad was like watching them, and I'm like, oh, you love these too? And so, I don't know, since then, just been a thing. But I know that I was a huge fan in high school, and I used to do these marathon trivia games with my old friend Adam Dupree, since passed on, rest in peace. But I've had a love for this for 20, 25 years, and
you were probably what, a sophomore, maybe a junior in high school when the Craig one came out?
Casino Royale, I went to see the premiere with my friend Adam and my friend Phil, who I think at various times has listened to the show. So if you're listening, Phil, hey. But that would have been I think that came out in early 2006.
So that would have fall.
Was it fall? So yeah, it would have been my junior year of high school.
Okay.
Going into so fall of 06, spring of 07 would have been my junior year.
Because Bond is always a more winter franchise. It's more winter based. I'm trying to think if there's been one in the summer, but I think it's usually like
I think those are going back to like the early 60s. You got some of those during the summer. Like I want to say some of the like Dr. No, I would think it would have been released in the summer.
Yeah, because of the Jamaica setting, but it's always been like a Thanksgiving release, I think, in America. That seems like it's the golden spot for that.
But regardless, a couple of other people, is there no better or more famous line in comic book movies, at least in the early portion of comic book movies, than kneel before Zod? So we got to thank Terrence Stamp for that. Tristan Rogers, I obviously am not a huge daytime soap person, but I do remember The Rescuers Down Under being one of my favorite movies as a child, along with The Great Mouse Detective. And I watched those a lot as a like 4, 5, 6-year-old.
My grandparents took me to see The Rescuers Down Under in theaters.
And I know Dad was a huge fan of the Equalizer series when it was first on TV.
Correct. I love that television show. Never missed it. And then Danielle Spencer, if you are my age, a very meteoric and very precipitous fall was a TV show called What's Happening with a character named Rerun, who was a heavyset African-American actor who wore suspenders. And when you're my age, all you'd have to do is say Rerun or What's Happening, and everybody knew what the show was. In fact, when I saw this and was preparing, I mentioned to Mother that you remember What's Happening and Rerun, and the sister, she just passed away of cancer at 60. Immediately your mother knew, because when you're in that range of 55 to about 65, this was a big, big show on ABC at the time.
And then, of course, finally, I mean, obviously Michael Click didn't appear in any of these series, but as a primary producer on, I would guess, two of the bigger action franchises that kind of reshaped what television was, 24 and Homeland. I mean, he's got a lot to say in where television is at now based on his work on those two shows and being an Emmy winner for both of them.
I watched first probably 2 or 3 seasons of 24 and then kind of fell off. But that first season, I think, is a ton of fun.
I think I watched 4 seasons of 24 and like 3 seasons of Homeland. And I think they both start out really well with certain premises, but they have to evolve as shows, and they just kind of fall into this trap where the procedure or the process of it all kind of gets in the way of anything interesting in the storytelling after a while. But regardless, all of these here we have great relationships with and are sorry to see them go yet again. And so we remember them here fondly with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's move to Best Funniest Lines. I don't have a whole lot of nominees here. I know that we always have some difficulty with the foreign language nature of these films in the translation of certain things, but I have 3 that I have to be nominated. One is one I led off the show with. Don't be anxious. Whatever God ordains is for the best.
So, and I've got one big one, which is This Is My Home Now Too. But just look at it. It's like living in the jungle. Jackals prowling around as soon as night falls. No neighbors to sit and talk to. When you're not home, I'm terribly uneasy. But you wouldn't understand. You eat and sleep and go about your work, unconcerned whether you're paid or not. I had lots of dreams too. All the things I wanted to do.
Durga by Leaf of Lime and Karamacha Tree. Rain, rain, away with thee. Rain, rain, away with thee.
Durga, we'll go see the train when I'm better, all right? We'll get there early and have a good look. You want to?
That's it for me. Just the one big one.
Indar, can't an old woman have wishes too?
That was the last one I had.
And I will say, much of this movie has beautiful quotes throughout it. The quotes page is pretty light, but there's a poetry to this movie that I think is very human and beautifully written.
So on that note, let's move to the Stanley Rubric. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film between the industry and the audience. 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. How have they viewed the legacy of this film roughly 5 years after it came out, so 1960 to today? Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go second.
I think there is no doubt that this has a high legacy within certain circles of the industry, particularly the critics and the directors field, given how much it has been celebrated, particularly by the Sight and Sound, but in also other publications, primarily internationally. But I don't think it has translated to being the kind of film that is celebrated and permeated certain other cultural spheres. It is a critic darling, but maybe not quite as ubiquitous. So I'm kind of divided a little bit where this isn't as famous as some other foreign language films. 8.5 comes to mind, where those come up pretty quickly. And while this one is certainly a film that I think is maybe within the first 10 to 15 international film names that would come up in critics circles to be celebrated, of glorious examples of great film from elsewhere in the world, especially during the early periods where, while American and I guess English film was the predominant form, they weren't the only ones making film at that time. So I'm going to go with a 4.5 in the industry. But again, because this is not a film that I think is, even among cinephiles, it has not got the name recognition of some of its contemporaries, nor has it been seen as widely, I think, by even the cinephile crowd. I'm going to go for a 2 and a 6.5.
For the industry itself, I'm going to give it I guess 4.5 is about where I am too on that. I had originally thought about a 4, and then I stopped to think about the fact that even though it was not, it may have exceeded and outside of the 5 years, the fact is it launched the career of the director, 40, 50 films, I think, overall. So the impact on Indian cinema overall, I'm giving it a half point up. So I'm going to go match your 4.5 from what I originally thought. For the public, it does not have a lot of staying power. I don't think people in the United States have heard of it. I think a lot of cinephiles have not heard of it.
Traditionally, and I'm just trying to stop you there for a second, when we have judged similar films that are not from the United States, we try not to incorporate much of the United States crowd into the determination of legacy and impact and some of those other categories, relying instead on the audiences that the film was made for to begin with, if that helps at all. I know that,
and maybe I didn't express it as such, but that's what I kind of was taking into account. I was thinking of the broad world market because, it's in the major polls and it is revered by a lot of directors and such. But again, I think it's kind of in the world in general lost a little bit of its oomph. So I'm still going to say, though, that it's got such strong legs among a certain element of cinephiles. I'm going to go a half point higher than you and go to the 2.5. So I'm at a 7 overall.
So I'm going to land exactly where Dana lands at a 7. I'm just going to be a little bit higher on the industry with it being a 5. I think this is a movie that every 5 years seems to inch higher on those critics lists, higher on the industry lists. It keeps getting restorations and people still keep showing it in film school. People still keep talking about it. And I think people are still reckoning with this movie. And it, as Dana said, it did really spearhead a new cinematic movement in India. This is the first movie of its kind in India. It was always musicals and swashbuckling adventures before that, and this changes that tone and focus a little bit. But on the public side, this is a movie that not many people do know, but I do think if people give it the chance and they saw it, I think a lot of people would really respond to this. I think if people let their hearts open to this, I think it would open a lot of people's doors to being more adventurous in cinema. So I think 2 is where I'm going to fall. I thought about a 1.5 and falling kind of with you at a 6.5, Tom, but I think 7 feels right. So yeah, 7.
So that's a 6.83 average between the three of us. Let's move to impact and significance. This is a measure of the impact and significance within the first 5 years of the film's release, so roughly 1955 to 1960. And again, we will split this category between how it was impacted both in the industry and in the general audience, although this is more of an international or worldwide audience than we've ordinarily or normally done. And that adds up to a total of 10. So 5 and 5 points for each of those two groups. Dad, since you went second last time, would you like to lead here?
I will. For the industry, it had a lot of buzz in Europe and various awards and film festivals and such early on within that first 5 years. I think that there was a lot of buzz. It got wide critique. That people had problems with it, but yet there was a lot that people didn't, that really liked it, etc. I'm giving it a 4 for the industry itself, simply because, and I can't go any higher than that, simply because there was several negative critics, but there was a lot of awards and several positive ones. I think 4 is about right for me. As far as the public, it did make quite a bit of money ultimately, as far as on a really low budget. I think it was originally fairly popular from what I could tell and what I could check out in India itself. So it was shown a lot and was popular. I think it was also shown or viewed a lot in Europe specifically. I don't know about the United States. I could not find anything about that. But I think that from that standpoint, I'm again going to go with a 4 for that. So I think overall, within that first period of time, I think an 8 is overall right for this film within that first 5 years.
See, I'm going to give less credence to the small contingent of American critics at the time who were not yet ready for such a progressive film. I think the only people that could have been ready to receive something of this are those that experienced film outside the strictures of the studio system in Hollywood at the time, which was kind of formulaic. It didn't really rock the boat terribly much. As much as I like American film during the 1950s, it was shot a very similar way. Most of the structure, the set design, the rest of it was very similar. This film is probably something that you could maybe see more of in like the 1990s in the way that it's filmed, framed, and kind of rehearsed, and kind of almost indie punk rock kind of notions of it. Like it has certain flares of like Steven Soderbergh, like early Steven Soderbergh from the 90s kind of era for me. But it's made in 1955. And so part of the reason that I go on that tangent to say that is that this revolutionized what is, I think at this point, widely accepted as the second largest film or cinema market in the world. I guess maybe China might be another true competitor to this, but the Indian cinema market and how much they put into and invest in their stars and their film culture over there is overlooked by most Americans because we just are not familiar with it, and those films don't come here nearly as often as probably they should. There are a few that eventually cross over and certainly make their way here, but we feel kind of the separation between the two. But this could be the film that revolutionizes what eventually Indian cinema becomes. And it was very popular in its moment, not just in its own country, but even in many of the other places outside of America. And so by that standpoint, the fact that we get multiple different people that go on to much bigger careers, we talked about the director, we talked about the cinematographer, we talked about the composer. I think all of that to me adds up to an easy 5 on the industry. And I will match Dad on an audience 4 because it's really hard for me to measure exactly what its impact was on a global or international audience at the time when we don't have great reporting on that. So I'm at a 9.
I'm going to land at a 9 with you, Tom. 5 on the industry, I think, is an easy. And for the fact that there's a sequel 1 year later and then 4 years later. So within 5 years, it gets 2 sequels, which also did well financially. It was seen. It did very well with critics polls, with gets a BAFTA nomination. Was it Cannes? So to me, I think it's an easy 5 and a 4. So right at a 9.
All right. So that is an 8.67 average between the three of us. Let's move to Novelty. Novelty is a measure of both the originality and the execution on anything having to do with the movie. 5 and 5 points apiece for a total of 10. Peterson, would you like to lead off this category?
Sure. This is a tough one, I think, because is the story that original? Not really. I mean, there's very little plot, but I think the manner in which we're watching it is pretty novel. Like, we are watching its little vignettes throughout the entire film. We're seeing little snippets at a time, and then it fast forwards a little bit, you're getting a little bit more of a snippet of time. So I think from the originality perspective, I'd put it at 3, but the execution side, I'm going to put it at 4. So I think I'm going to get it a 7, and that might seem a little harsh, but I don't know how you can go much higher. Just Ray is filming this beautifully, but again, we mentioned Richard Linklater earlier. It's similar in Boyhood in the sense that, there's a lot of originality in kind of the manner in which he's telling the story, but it's not all that novel in the sense that it's original. So I think 7 is pretty fair.
So I believe I led off the program by saying I wasn't sure how many contemporary films were quite taking on the slice of life history as this one. Now, looking at this a little bit in between the breaks and such, there's, I guess, the term and the history of slice of life also has some contemporariness in the moment that this movie is made, particularly from Paddy Chayefsky, Reginald Rose, some of the other ones during the 50s where there was a little bit more of this life as it currently exists. That being said, I think that this film is very progressive in its framing devices, how it looks, the style, because I mentioned before, the way that the cinematography is and the framing of certain things makes it feel somewhat mockumentary or documentary type style. Like that's the closeness with which we're kind of panning in on people and just watching them kind of live their mundane moments. And so from that standpoint, from these people, quite literally, other than maybe Citizen Kane, where you just have a bunch of stage people who have never done a film before getting together and making what at least Peterson thinks is one of the greatest films of all time. Your mileage may vary. Or at least...
It's not a crazy statement to make.
No, I know it's not. But also, this film is a bunch of random people strung together with a shoestring budget, with people who really probably have not acted before and have definitely not directed or shot a film or written a film before, coming together and making something that at least we're talking about it. I forget how long ago this movie was, so forgive me here. I think it's 70. This is the 70th anniversary. That's a long time for a film that was made out in the bush by a first-time director. And so there, to me, at least from the adversity that he had in the moment in making this film and doing it in a culture that was not nearly as celebrated, or at least had the blocking and tackling process put together. Like, had he done this in the Hollywood system, this is a pretty ordinary film. But doing it outside of that in a non-real, like, celebrated film culture yet, and kind of, in a way, creating the modern Indian cinema, I got to give it a little bit more credit for the originality on that. So I'm going to go with 5. Fuck it. Why not? I was impressed by this film. And on an execution level, I'm going to go with a 4. So I'm
Bump me up to 2 4s. Give me an 8. Bump me to 2 4s. Those are very compelling arguments.
All right, Dad, where do you fall?
I'm on 4.5 for the originality. I think that it is fairly original. Where I give it points off is because it's such loose structure as far as the script. It's almost like hit and miss. And as far as the originality of it, and the execution, it reminded me, when I'm hearing about how they all didn't know what they were doing, it kind of reminded me of the Mickey Rooney films with Judy Garland, where they're all, let's put on a show. And they all get together and put together and write the script and put this thing on. And it just kind of reminded me of that, because I'm listening going, how in the world do you get a film that's like this level? Nobody had a clue what they were doing. I mean, even Orson Welles didn't know what he was doing, but he had a whole group of people who had a good idea of what they were doing.
And he had a lot of money
to make Citizen Kane. I would have to give them at least a 4.5 for execution because they made this level of a film without having a clue what they were doing. And so I'm at a 9 overall.
So apparently Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney Films is the Dana Novelty Edison movie drop of the week.
Yeah.
You're always good for one, Dad.
Yep.
I mean, you did basically inspire a new segment for the Revisionist Almanac with Edison.
Anyway.
Gotta send the man.
So that is an 8.67 again for Novelty.
I'm surprised I'm the high man. Y'all are above me. I'm a little surprised at that.
What can we say? That hasn't already been said. All right, let's move to classicness on this one. This is basically a measurement of whether or not the film has aged well, if it was ahead of its time. If it is basically, well, is it classic? I don't have a better definition than that. So this category has a lot of nuance to it, and we cut to the man who loves to revel in the nuance. Dad, go ahead.
It was way ahead of its time from what, was going on, especially in Indian cinema, because it was on the cusp. It was on the very beginning. And the cinematography, everything about it showed that it was ahead of its time. The story of the mother and the lack of passion that she had out of life gets points up. The fact that the father has revelations about his inadequacies as a provider and caretaker for his family was also novel and ahead of its time. Where I give it some points down is, and I understand the time frame and where things are, it's the slapping in of the children around. I think it was at least 2, if not 3 occasions. And so I can't give it anything more, but I'll go with an 8 for classicness overall because of the nature of the film, but I won't go any higher than that because of the nature of the handling of discipline with the children.
Just in responding to your criticism there, I guess that didn't really bother me that much. I wasn't really struck by it. It was momentary. And as Peterson has so often alluded to, it was so matter of fact that it was kind of lost within the rest of the film for me. I think this film is very progressive. It's ahead of its time. It's got a lot of commentary on the very traditionalism of Indian caste, Indian economics, family dynamics, village life that is still somewhat part of the Indian culture yet to the day. And so because of that, I find that in addition to the universality and the timely themes that it still possesses, the ability to connect, my ability to empathize and relate to the struggles of this Indian family that's supposed to be in the late 1910s, that was made in the 1950s, and I'm watching 70 years later. I find that very classic. And so from that standpoint, I'm going to give it a 9.
So I'm just going to start with the slapping and the kind of parental violence. I think being that this is in more cinema verite style, being that it's in that parallel cinema, I think it's very honest to how those parents would have reacted in the moment. And I don't think Satyajit Ray is saying, I agree, this mom, like, it's filmed to be somewhat hard to watch. It's not supposed to be an easy couple of minutes to watch. It's supposed to be a tough moment where she's pulling her by her hair, and you're supposed to see the cruelty. And I think it's also supposed to show the humanity inside of her, that she is somebody of such deep feeling, but she can also make such horrible mistakes. And I don't think Satyajit Ray judges her for it. I think he presents her as she is, and I think that's part of the beauty of, one, the performance, but also the depiction of the mother. I think, Tom, you said the empathy you feel for this family. I think part of the classicness of the movie that makes it so truly powerful today, all these years later, is that this could be a melodrama. it could play this exact movie and you put it in a different director's hands, different performers, different cinematographer, musicians, everything. You change up the cast of characters who are on this film working on it. And it turns out it's impossible to watch because it's so saccharine and emotional. And when somebody dies, you feel it's manipulative. I don't think the deaths in this movie are manipulative at all. They are matter of fact and they're haunting, but I don't think they are manipulative by any means. And I just don't know about a movie that plays 70 years later that plays this well. So I think this is an easy 10 classicness for me. I think it's very easy to look at it as a 10. I don't know. I will go to the grave with it. I love this film. Easy 10.
So that's a 9 average between the three of us. Let's move to rewatchability. This is such a subjective category as to how often you may rewatch this that I've tried to add a little bit more objectivity to this category this season. So I will start to give you kind of a baseline, which is going to be, unfortunately, from the perspective of a much wider audience than what my own opinion would necessarily be. I enjoyed watching this film. I think I would have a good time going back to watch it again. Maybe not right away, but, at least maybe a year or two down the line. I think it's that kind of movie that you occasionally revisit and get something new out of. But for the majority of the casual film fans, slow, black and white, subtitles. Those three are going to be like really difficult for a lot of just casual people to kind of get over the hump and get out of their own way to watch something like this. And I'll be honest, if I hadn't put this on the schedule, I'm not sure I would have ever taken the plunge myself to watch something like this. I'm glad I did, and I'm glad that we moved stuff onto our schedule to challenge ourselves with films like this, because we will occasionally get something like this. Or I know Dad and I really enjoyed Another Round several years ago, the Vinterberg film. That was one. Three Idiots we both enjoyed. So there have been several films when we've really stepped outside of what we would normally do and what I think our audience is normally expecting of us, to incorporate some of these other films. Your Name is another good example there. But I still think that if you're just trying to sell this to a broad, general American audience, likely, this is going to be about a 3.5. I know. So, now, the more subjective feelings between the two of you.
All right, so I'm not quite as brutal.
I know.
Yes, I'll watch it again. Yes, I would probably recommend it to people. I would find it very difficult to convince a lot of people to watch it. It almost feel like I'd have to win a bet to get some people to watch it.
And this is supposedly setting up that you're going to be less brutal than I was?
Well, I'm at a 4.
Yes, that half point is so great.
Actually, I'll go to a 4.5 because, the fact that I would rewatch it and recommend it, I'll go with a 4.5.
Okay.
So being that this is about my rewatchability probably more than everyone else, I think it's a movie I've seen 14, 15 years ago the first time. And each time I watch it, it's gotten a shorter time frame each time. I think it was like 5 or 6 years the first time, and then it was like 3, 2, 1. Like it just condenses, and each time I think it just gets richer and more poignant with every rewatch. And it might be a movie I go back to now like once every 18 months, just because the humanity on display is just kind of unmatched. And it's, it is a tragedy and it's difficult to watch, but it does leave me with some bit of hope. So I personally am at like a 7.5 right now, and it might go up to like an 8.5 in a year from now. But I think 7.5 for me feels accurate, feels right.
So that's a 5.17 between the three of us. For audience score on this one, we had a 96% for Google users and a 93% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us a 9.45, which I was really pleasantly surprised by. So to repeat the categories, we had a 6.83 for legacy, an 8.67 for impact and significance, an 8.67 for novelty, a 9 for classicness, a 5.17 for rewatchability, and a 9.45 for audience score, giving us a final total of 47.79, and currently placing it on our list at number 104 between From Here to Eternity and Patton.
Respectable company.
Yeah.
2 Best Picture winners. Yeah. As always, if you have any commentary on any of our scores, disagree with us in any way, or just want to let us know that we're doing a great job and you enjoy listening, you can write us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at gmotepodcast, or write us at the website ronnieduncanstudios.com/gmotepodcast. Any remaining questions for this one? I don't have any.
I got one. And this is more, if you were to tell kind of the story of your life through a movie, and it was shown in this style, what would be the pinnacle event from your childhood it would focus on?
Boy. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what it would be.
From when I was really young. That's the problem.
You know, because I think about, personally, if I was to do this myself, there's like a couple of events I think about. You know, my parents, when they told me they're getting divorced, and my dad sitting us down in our dining room, which we never ate in. Never in the dining room. It was always the kitchen counter. And he brought us home junior bacon cheeseburgers from Wendy's. And we had over that conversation. And then another one was like, so my mom passed away on a Saturday and I was back at school on a Monday. I was 9. And I remember being brought into a separate room, and the teacher brought me in there so that she could tell the rest of the kids, hey, just so you guys know this happened. And it was, I sat there for like 5 minutes by myself in this like random room, and I was like, what's going on? So that kind of like very perceptive moment that is so specific.
I'm having some difficulty with this one because there's an obvious, I think, moment in my life from a tragedy perspective where I think I emotionally aged, but it's really, I'm not sure what my life is or how I would tell my story and how it's defined. That's part of my problem.
Yeah.
I've tried to control my story through such a self-deprecating way that I think I've distanced myself too much by poking fun at who I am, and thus being in a protectionist mode as opposed to owning who I am and what my identity is. And so I think there's a little bit of that lost in there, that it's hard for me to define that. But if there's one truly major tragic moment that I can point to, and I'm sure Dad already knows where I'm going. My best friend passed away in a car accident when I was 9. And it was kind of a seminal moment. I still remember pretty much everything about that day moment, kind of everything in that vicinity. And it's dramatically affected the relationship, I'm sure, that my parents had with his parents at the time. It was my boyhood pastor's son, eldest son. And so there's a lot of tangential connections that are still there and still very vivid for me. And even though I definitely lost great-grandparents, grandparents by that point, because my dad's mom had passed away a couple of years before that. So it's not like I hadn't been to funerals and felt sadness and death and some of those things. But when it's a contemporary like that,
there's immediacy to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody else who's 9 years old, and you're just like, you can't completely feel your way through all of that.
I can't pinpoint a very defining moment. It's a series of events. A couple of them are family secrets that I just simply do not want to discuss openly.
Well, yeah, of course.
From when I was a kid. But the one thing that became clear, my dad was a recovering alcoholic who had his own struggles. It took me a long time to come to terms with what I thought I should have as a father versus what I had as a father versus learning that he did the very best he could, considering that his childhood was absolute pile of shit. And just from that point, I guess it would be, I ended up having to take on responsibilities as an adult from about the age of 11 or 12 on, helping to make decisions, helping to keep things organized, making things run in my house. And I think it altered the path. To this day, I always feel like I have a duty to take care of people. It's probably one of the reasons I'm in the career that I am. And the type of career that I have, or the type of practice I have, is I have this sense of nurturing. I'm always trying to help. Even if I'm complaining about it, I'm still trying to help. And I just feel that obligation. So I guess if that were the story of mine, it would be a series of events showing the fact that I had to grow up way before I wanted to or should have, and that I've always had this responsibility put upon me.
Both good answers. Both kind of what this movie kind of gets at, I think, is that kind of intimacy.
Certainly. Well, if there are no more remaining questions, we of course want to thank our fabulous guest, Mr. Hill, for being back with us for his 10th appearance. And you know what that means. It's t-shirt time.
T-shirt time.
You will be back again with us, I believe, in about 4 weeks for another, check my notes, David Fincher film. Is that right?
Has he directed a movie before?
Yeah.
7, okay. Yeah. 7 Year Itch?
Yes, that's
Okay.
it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tom Ewell. Right?
Tom Ewell.
What the fuck?
I think more
The 7-year
Marilyn Monroe is.
Oh, God. Okay, Dad. It's data reference time. Gather around, kids. Let's hear about Spencer Tracy's Edison. Okay, but Peterson, remind everybody again what you're working on and where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can get my back catalog at War Starts at midnight. Just before this goes up, I've had a appearance on the Lone Screenplay podcast about Ron, a curious I was Ron. Well, kind of as well, one of the masters of foreign and international cinema. And then 1975, go back, check that out. Nice, I think 6 hours of content at least on that 1 year from myself, Andrew Korn, friend of the show, Kieran B, friend of the show, and then Mike Gibble, friend of the show. And yeah, and then coming up here in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good. So I will forego some of our normal remaining thoughts for the week here, unless Dad has something pressing he really wants to share. I will just say, stay tuned for next week. We will finally be making our major announcement of what's been going on in this project that we've now hinted at many different times that Mr. Hill is a part of.
I got to finish it.
As well as quite a few other people that we will be mentioning by name during the course of the show next week. But certainly stay tuned for what we have planned and what we're planning to tell you. We're very excited to be able to finally be able to share this with everybody and what's about to happen. And it will be happening over the next several months as we slowly dole this all out, but just something we're very excited to share. So just make sure you tune in next week. And that's all you'll get for this week.
I will tune in next week.
Same bat time, same bat channel. Talk about old references. Anyway, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. I am big. It's the pictures that got small. Next week for our 277th episode, we welcome back Frank Mendoza to revisit Sunset Boulevard from 1950, celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. Written and directed by Billy Wilder with Charles Brackett and D.M. Marshman Jr., cinematography by John F. Seitz, music by Franz Waxman, starring William Holden, Gloria Swanson, and Eric von Stroheim. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GmailPodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.